Any Jordan Peterson fans out there? Any Jordan Peterson fans or critics out there, or anyone who has read 12 Rules for Life? I'm curious what some of the fast lane opinions are. Got the book because I liked a lot of what I saw from him online, and it was interesting to hear the hype online, endless people talking about how the book turned their life around. Not that I need my life turned around, but was still curious enough to get it. I'm about 100 pages in and not positive what to think or if I need to keep reading. Some of the lessons seem obvious, may be useful to people whose lives are a mess. But so far it's been, be confident, take care of yourself, don't hang out with losers, compare yourself to yourself not others. To be honest, a lot of this was covered in MFL it seems. Hey Thray, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan so I'll try to be unbiased with this. I definitely think the book is worth reading all the way through, while some of the rules for life may seem a little obvious. There is valuable information throughout this book. Jordan's unique way of thinking and anecdotes really changes your perspective on the subjects he writes about. With that said, it's quite a heavy read and I will likely have to read it again as I noticed myself struggling to completely comprehend some of the concepts he explains and writes about. I also found it a little too religion heavy for my preference but overall well worth continuing with. Hope that helps. Thanks. I am finding the same thing that it's a heavy read, even just his vocabulary is far beyond what I can comprehend at points. I do find a lot of what he says about gender roles interesting, as well as preparing for chaos. Although it seems a bit dark, I think I'll more than likely finish reading. I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. I really liked 12 Rules for Life, but it's a pretty heavy read and probably requires more than one read through. I took a bunch of notes and keep going back to them. I particularly love that he's a big fan of cleaning up your own life before taking on the world. Like people who march for causes but can't even brush their hair. Same here, I read from Rule 1 to Rule 5 about 144 pages. I like watching the guy talk. I think that oral medium of communication is where he shines. He is terrific and there is something captivating about him, his message and his eloquence. His message makes sense and I agree with him. There is nothing new or groundbreaking, maybe aside from the fact of embracing the chaos. And so I am reading the book more to get into an exchange with his mind, rather than for the content. And at times, I find he is pushing the limit. For example, the link between humans not taking care of themselves and the Genesis is for me far stretched. I definitely plan to go back and finish the book at one point. He's basically a reaction to Western societal defects, which are centered around the university regime. Apparently in his country they went completely nuts. People could unilaterally declare a new pronoun for themselves, and if you didn't use it you could be punished. In a world of anti-Oedipus the federal, there will also be Jordan Petersons trying to restore sanity. Clean your room. Jokes aside, I'm not really a fan, meaning I don't belong to the crowd of fellas that everything Dr. Peterson says, they take it extremely serious. Although I went through a lot of his material and I think that even though there is a lot of basic things, most of us fail at being persistent with it, he says. The book was a valuable source of information heavy on religion but might help you turn some doors you have in your head. I respect his work and I think he has literally helped thousands with his YouTube videos. I like his debate videos. Yes, I'm a fan. Exactly what I was thinking. Love his speaking but the written stuff is a little bit harder to stay tuned in for. Will likely finish too lol. Yes, I am fan. I'm a huge fan. I started watching his lectures about a month ago. I'm about 1 or 3 through his book 12 Rules for Life and I find it life-changing. I like Jordan Peterson, The book was challenging to finish though, and I agree with others about the heaviness. I found the last two rules very powerfully explained. Rule 11, do not bother children when skateboarding explanation was eye-opening in some ways. For someone not too familiar with Dostoevsky, political thinking and Jungian psychology, it can be much more interesting in my opinion. Man, after the book I will never eat a lobster roll anymore. Will you stand up straight with your shoulders back though? Yes, also because I stopped saying things that makes me weak. Never heard of him, thought he was one of these new millennial gurus. Man, was I off? Big fan. Like his talks, am reading the book at night and have it as an audio book which he reads himself, check it out. Playing in my car. But he should ease down on all the religious stuff and examples. I like JP. Read 12 Rules not so long ago. I like his basic message of responsibility. There is a bit of a cultish following appearing though. Not sure what to make of that. I see it putting people off of him a bit. On the religious side of things, I'm not Christian, but I appreciate his take on the stories, moral, archetypal lessons. Stories we crafted by watching ourselves and learning from that. I think his focus on these stories comes from the fact that they have survived for so long, and so there comes the notion that perhaps they contain something of value, even if not exactly what fundamentalists would have you believe. I think you made a great point here, and there are a couple of videos of him lecturing a class about the stories of religion and their true meaning. Even atheist thinkers used them to extract their theories. With regards of the cult, I'm observing something like that, and I can only say that is history repeating itself. Peterson gave structure to a bunch of men that were kinda lost, straightened them up, gave them couple of slaps in the face and have a structure for their daily life so they are no longer useless. There will be who follow him everywhere, even he would say now drink this poison, and there will be people that will appreciate his knowledge but move away the second he becomes some cult leader. I'm in the second group. I like his videos more than his book. This is one of my favorites videos about JBP, similar to MJ's perception of time value over lifetime in my opinion. Huge fan, met him after one of his talks. A great man who is on a mission and is literally helping people by the 10,000s to change their life in a huge, meaningful and dramatic way. Glad to see the positive response on the forum. If you haven't seen his Kathy Newman interview, I would recommend taking a watch. Been following him about a year, not sure I'll read the book though. The Kathy Newman interview was fantastic. Left me feeling sad as well in a bittersweet way though. I like him on what I like him on, but I certainly don't agree with him on everything. He's a net positive in society, as a counterbalance to, but he's also a Deepak Chopra type who bends terms to fit his concepts. Mostly because everyone's been nailed with the whole feminism thing for years. Lots of misinformation. Even made me pay closer attention to my relationship. My girlfriend is far less aggressive in life and business like many women I know, and hearing all this shit about how men and women are the same, I always thought there was something wrong, but it's just biology. Regarding the cult-like status, although Jordan Peterson is great, I think the hardcore cult following are the neckbeard types, because he's saying, you need to be alpha, casual sex is wrong, women aren't as aggressive, etc. No, for me what was depressing was the journalism side of it, if that makes sense. She's smart, she knows better, but so many people believe what they hear, and it's depressing to see despite how obvious it is. I know it's been going on forever, but I haven't had a TV in quite a few years while traveling and had forgotten about it a little. Lol. Edit, it's so late here, and that is one of the crappiest explanations of a post I've ever given. So you are basically saying the pay gap legend still triggers feminists? Lol. I don't agree with everything he says, but I have to give him major fast lane props. In addition to writing books, speaking fees, etc., his fans also support him with a Patreon account. His Patreon earnings doubled from $30,000 or month to $60,000 or month. between April and October last year, and I assume they've continued to grow. Obviously a lot of people feel he's providing major value. Yep. Women, and even a majority of men, learn about masculinity and life in general from shows like The Bachelorette, romantic comedies, etc. It's all garbage. I'm a fan. Now excuse me while I go sort out my lobsters. Got hooked on Jordan Peterson's YouTube videos, so got his audio book. Unfortunately, had to return it after part 1 because while I found his YouTube videos concise and inspiring, the book just seemed to ramble on with the same ideas and points made over and over again. My recommendation is to skip the book and go all out on his videos. He tends to repeat the same ideas over and over, which isn't a bad thing. A few great ideas greater than many half-baked ideas sent from my SMG 935V using TaperTalk. I do not understand why there are so many Jordan Peterson videos reposted on YouTube by pure pickup artists. Probably because Peterson talks a lot about male-female relationship, mating game and hypergamy, which are things people are interested in learning from, social dynamics and evolutionary psychology in action. Listen to the audiobook of 12 Rules for Life. Much of it was great. Some of it was a little of it was garbage. Agree with that it was religion heavy, though some of that was very interesting to me as well, from an interpretation standpoint. I will say that I did not necessarily buy his stance on everything, specifically when he gets into gender roles and privilege, etc., but overall I think he had an interesting take on things. YMMV, but I would say it was worth reading, or in my case, listening to. He does a good job of pointing out the obvious things that our disintegrating culture forbids. I predict he will be assassinated by someone trying to stop Hitler. Hey Thray, yeah, I've followed Peterson for quite a while now. At first I was enamored with him, but as time has gone on I've become more critical of some of his positions as I've learned the nuance of his arguments and ideas. I think it's probably worth a read, particularly if you like the way he reframes religious stories to apply to modern life. I actually posted a review of his book on my YouTube channel not long ago. Here it is if you'd care to hear the nitty-gritty about the book. I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson. He's one of the best communicators I've ever watched and does an amazing job of winning you over to his side. A lot to learn from in terms of persuasion. I bought it on Audible and I would say there are some good bits here and there with the frequent story tangents that so many authors like to do. My problem was that there were too many biblical references, so I returned it. If you find the book heavy, I listened to the first 5 chapters while moving into our new place the last week and found it quite enjoyable in that format. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And that includes your self-reflections, enough said. This is definitely a misinterpretation of his message though. He talks about how men can improve themselves by becoming competent and benevolent, rather than bitter and resentful. I think his most devoting following will truly get his message, and the rest will shrink back into our or the red pill, whichever other degenerate forum they frequent. Making intellectualism cool again. I agree with his stuff. Don't agree with his politics. Well, I agree with some of them, but certainly not all of them. His idea that there's a radical leftist conspiracy in academia is based on truth and yet is a bit of a reach. Truth is, academics are mostly just sheltered but smart kids who never wanted to stop partying and were able to keep doing the college thing long enough to make it a career. They have no idea what the real world is like. Drive. Peterson is one of the few who isn't quite like this, as he grew up in a not-so-good part of rural Alberta during an economic recession. If you consider this, of course most academics would be radical leftists. It's not a conspiracy or a plot to overthrow anything. They teach what they teach because they're sheltered, and maybe it does have a negative effect on students who speak up about their own politics. Maybe it does create a safe space, an ideological silo where unrealistic beliefs become reality. But it's certainly not a conspiracy. Anyway, I'm done getting political here. As far as what he teaches, it's actually pretty good for people, especially men who have lost their way or forgotten what they should be doing in life. Depression sets in when you're lost, directionless. He helps people find that way. Some may find that he states the obvious or belabors points that needn't be belabored. But I think he's overall a positive influence on people my age and younger. I like the way he analyzes things from deep perspective. Nothing is set in stone but has a number of factors working behind the scenes, especially his sayings about men and women office working environment, very intriguing. I'm halfway through 12 rules, so far it's very good. Some interesting concepts to think about. I like his take on prehistory that comes out in his analysis. The "don't lie" ever thing got me thinking, how much easier would life be if you didn't lie to yourself or others in any way? Even day-to-day choices. Is this project really useful or am I kidding myself? Not lying would also force you to think and present a stronger face to the world. As others have said, I'll have to read it a few times to digest it properly. Good question. Can anyone think of people who think in a similar way? I'd be interested to expand my knowledge in this area. Thomas Sowell is one. I think this video sums up what I dislike about him, and why I don't watch his videos. He's a pessimistic and negative person. He basically ended that lesson with "if you're at the bottom you're effed," end of lesson. Let's just ignore the 1 billion people who left poverty since 1990. This is why I'll watch a Thiel video over a Peterson video any day. Both draw attention to the power law, something I believe is important. But Thiel at least offers advice on how people can counteract it. And actually sometimes, I get the feeling if I spent too much time around Peterson I'd consider jumping off something tall. Peterson is passionate about pointing out how 1% in any domain get most of the goods, and how a tiny fraction of a company produces most of the results. I.e. all the life's so hard stuff. He doesn't point out that the number of domains are infinite, and that the power law is also the origin of the "your first million is the hardest" effect. As you start to enter the blade of the hockey stick, a slight movement further into the blade produces a large change in results. Just telling people how tough life is, but then giving basic advice like make your bed, just doesn't cut it. He at least talked about the churn of the 1%. He could have talked about what usually leads to entry to it. I'm guessing he didn't because he doesn't really care. It's too positive and optimistic a topic. You are missing a key point. Please allow me to explain. Life is hard, and effing miserable sometimes. Just because you are in the 1% of the lucky people of this planet you have food, shelter, a Wi-Fi connection, it doesn't make any less struggling. What Peterson makes you focus is to understand how lucky you are to be already there, and you can aim at something honorable and have a chance to get further into another 1% cluster of luckier people. That's one of his key points. Be precise and aim high. Even if you are a stoicist, you will see similarities in accept what you can't control and start to work towards something better with what you have. Clean your room. I suggest reading a bit of Nassim Taleb, with the Inserto series. If you thought Peterson didn't touch success because it was too optimistic, wait till you read him. I once saw that Jordan Peterson is an intellectual for unintelligent people. I think it was clickbait, but is there any truth to that? I love Jordan. I was just watching him on Joe Rogan's show today. I'm looking forward to checking out 12 Rules for Life for sure. This was something I noticed too. I don't share your degree of dislike for Peterson, but I find that he's a depressant in large doses. Mainly because I don't agree with the idea that life is suffering. It's a part of life, but it's not life itself. I'm not suffering right now. I'm having a pretty fantastic day. I have limited knowledge on this, but I think it relates to my question of whether it's fast lane material. It seems like a lot of it is targeted to young men in the pits of despair. I really like the guy, But the fact that what he's saying is big news for a bunch of millennial men also makes me a little sad. Did nobody under the age of 35 have a surly hard-ass grandpa? If you leave out the cat rule and add a generous amount of profanity, I feel like most of it was standard stuff you heard from older guys growing up. Repped for having a fantastic day. I'm a fan. Read 12 Rules and thought it was great. Lot of reading between the lines to unlock the value. The fact that the rules almost seem too simple and logical is the beauty of it. The simplest solutions are usually the most elegant and most difficult. My girlfriend and I went for a Jordan Peterson's World Tour presentation last night. It was pretty anticlimactic. He talked for 2 hours non-stop before we decided to leave. Even in college he has to take breaks every 120. But that wasn't the main disappointment. He stated the lecture with talking about gulags and Nazi concentration camps, then moved on to serial killers, then to people with mental disorders, then talked for over a half an hour about the Garden of Eden and the stories in the Old Testament. I fell asleep a few times. We decided to leave early to beat the traffic. I agree, he is a deeply negative and unhappy person, who is able to find philosophical ways to explain his unhappiness, the cruel world around him, and his reason for being. None of this rings a bell for me. Although he does find peculiar and sometimes entertaining explanations for many things. I think all the Mktars and Puas on YouTube do a much better job of presenting his ideas and putting them into context than he does himself. I would stick to those videos of him from now on. LOL. I have to admit that I did get the same thought more than once in the last couple of days. Not a fan. His politics are too conservative for me. But there are a couple of things I appreciate about him. He is getting a new generation out of the Peter Pan syndrome. I have a couple of guy friends under 30 who say reading his stuff stopped them from becoming total losers. So, that's a good thing. Also, he is very easy on the eye. Helped me to get through his grandpa rhetoric vids. I think the badass grandfather era is getting about as relevant as outlaws in the Old West. My grandfather was very similar to Clint Eastwood character out of Grand Torino. Looked very similar to Clint as well. I know 3 different boys ranging from 11 to 16 and I think there's a generational problem. They are lazy, socially retarded, and irresponsible. All around pussies. They pretty much only want to play video games and eat good-tasting junk food. I think Jordan Peterson is interesting and makes some good points, especially the stuff about dominance hierarchies, but it's just talk. A lot of long talk about abstract things. He's a college professor and an author. 2 things that thrive on huge amounts of words and talking and very little doing. But that's his product, talking and writing. I don't have the attention, care or time to ingest his product. All of these professional talkers and writers end up in the same camp as people like Tony Robbins. Just wasting people's time and attention, thinking there is some secret message you need to hear before you act. These talkers or authors should just live by example of their own advice and actually do something with it instead of speaking and writing it to others. As so eloquently put it, thinking about thinking is a waste of time. And I'll add another one, those who know don't speak, and those who speak don't know. Sent from my SMG 950U using TaperTalk. Jordan Peterson is like a stern, righteous and all-knowing father figure, which many people did not have in their lives, some want very much, and some do not want to at all. I like what I've seen, but I admit that it's not very much. What really stood out to me though is that, 1. He seems to speak very purposefully. He's not knee-jerking his responses or spouting nonsense or arguing out of emotion. He thinks about what he wants to say and says it how he means it. 2. His arguments are very well thought out. He's clearly educated on the subjects that he talks about. Honestly, I fully believe the world needs more folks capable of forming well-thought-out arguments like this on both sides of every issue instead of cheaply playing to emotions and anger. Recently watched his Simba lectures. Yes, he made lectures out of Disney's Simba, where he tells you what the meaning of it is. What a... The whole point of these Disney movies, before Disney became Frozen and The Last Jedi, was to instill the lessons upon people without wandering interpretation involving Nazis and disease metaphors. That said, he's a psychology teacher. So the fact he dwells on psychopathy and schizophrenia topics is probably what these students are supposed to be learning about, or getting prepared for. Doesn't translate that well to mainstream though. The best thing he could is to team up with a positive guy, who basically agrees with his premises, but is able to provide the optimistic and constructive ways to proceed from them. Okay, so Peterson has laid out how rough life is. Now, I'm going to spend the next half of the lecture providing strategies, techniques, and guidance how to succeed in spite of those things. The thing is, these clips on YouTube are snippets of his whole lectures. If you watch the whole thing or read his book, what he's talking about makes more sense. Is someone profoundly pessimistic because they say poverty sucks, so don't let yourself end up there? Actually, most of his lessons provide an alternative on how you can better your life. Check out more of his videos. He's a psychologist who's helping other people to understand and better themselves, and teaching millions of people. How is that not doing anything? I've seen many of his videos. There is a clear trend of negativity and pessimism, and little practicable advice. There are far better sources for this. Frankly, I'm not surprised given his career as psychologist or teacher. I'll pay attention to what a businessman has to say any day. Even his 12 Rules book was mediocre for help, despite its interesting content. Making your bed and not getting in the way of kids skateboarding, followed by theocratic ramblings, really doesn't cut it as clear actionable life advice. Perhaps for his psychopath patients it does, but for everyone else, not so much. I guess my primary gripe with him is that he's seen as a help to young men, without being an inspiration. Inspiration is much more powerful than advice, and I'd never want to end up as negativity wallowing as him in a million years. Every video I watch, I hear Luddite fallacy crap, or these sub-IQ 85 people are useless and doomed, or your life is determined already by how many numbers you can hold in your head at once, or whatever other borderline antisocial preachings. The fact rebellion has had to come from the education system, from a mild leftist balking at the radicals, rather than initiated by parents saying these guys are losers. Here's some biographies of winners, is a disgrace. He's a psychologist who's helping other people to understand and better themselves, and teaching millions of people. How is that not doing anything? Psychologists are useless? I've dealt with many firsthand. Any profession that relies on sitting in a four-walled room and talking for hours and billable hours will get exactly the results you expect from such a passive activity: none. Not to say some well-chosen relevant words from someone who has a track record of successful action can't be valuable. It can. Some of the advice on this forum would qualify. But mass-market abstract generalizations pumped up with tons of word fluff doesn't change anything. And people's understanding and bettering themselves is done through their own understanding and action. To say Jordan Peterson helps people improve is one of those subjective statements that can't be proven or disproven. Which is exactly my point. Who has more impact? Someone on the Forbes 400 billionaire list that has built something real and tangible that people use, or an author who puts words on a page and talks on a stage? Curing someone's cancer is making their life better. No words or subjectivity needed. Sent from ISMG 950U using TaperTalk. Hell yes, from his site. He's a clinical psychologist, so he's a bit more useful than there. So how does that make you feel, types? His research, if you guys take a step back from his words and look at what he's actually doing. 1. The content he provides for free on YouTube is his marketing. He even turned off ads to reduce customer-to-product friction. He does give useful advice. I know I've learned a lot about myself just from listening to his early lectures. And even corrected one of my negative habits because of this understanding. Then don't forget the controversial viewpoints that get people talking about him and bringing him on their shows, too. His all-over-the-place style of speaking is for his target audience. Millennials with the short attention spans. In 1 second he's on Disney, the next on Stalin. 3. His target market isn't just millennials, but males basically at the bottom of the barrel. His future authoring program, which looks like a goal-setting exercise. There are few people who teens adolescents can look up to and say, goal-setting is cool. Plus he's making boatloads of money. $60K or more on Patreon on his book tour. His product seems fast lane to me. I see it as realistic. If that's all you're getting from him, perhaps it says more about you than of Peterson. What's that quote? As soon as I started thinking what would Ayn Rand say, everything became crystal clear. This is why he resonates so well with all the losers, crazy folks, and others who are inclined towards negative thinking. He resonates with their core beliefs. And this is why those who hold the benevolent universe premise think that something is wrong with him. Like he is really smart, but he is definitely not from where I grew up and currently live. Because of his core beliefs, Ayn Rand would have not given a second thought to his existential theories. He is more for guys who admire Nietzsche. This was pretty good. Just neutral tone philosophy, and very technical yet actionable. I think he's getting better at his new role in life. I withdraw any disrespect for his material now. I am still in the middle of his audio book. The people who suggested it were right. It's much less heavy to listen to than read. I am actually quite glad I continued. Again, it is nothing new and groundbreaking for someone who has been interested in personal development for a while, but it's great to see a new perspective. I think much of the hype he is getting is from those without any knowledge of personal development. He's kind of making it cool for those who haven't been exposed to it yet. I've listened to quite a few of his lectures and I read his book 12 Rules. I would say I am a big fan of his work. As others have said in this thread, most of the information he dispenses in regards to personal development can be seen as self-evident to many of us that are not that young, myself included, but there is an entire generation of young people, mostly boys, that are lacking strong male role models in their lives and are feeling lost. Combine this with some of the recent campaigns on toxic masculinity and you have quite a large audience dying for some proper basic guidance in life. Personally, I am really interested in his views on religion. He sees religion as the crystallization of the hero worship mythology whereby the higher being, in essence, is the representation of the perfect being. All religious and mythological stories are then collections of wisdom and guidance towards the perfect hero which have been developed from the Neolithicum to today. In our Western society, we have largely discarded these collections of guidance with total freedom, and this might have perilous consequences. I have read 12 Rules for Life and have therefore become a big fan of Jordan's work. I think the book is definitely worth read through all to the end. I like the way he can articulate his points, and although these rules are somewhat obvious as you say, I like how he puts in words things that I've always thought about but just didn't know how to put them into words. For anyone who wants to see his address at the Oxford Union. I personally love the guy, and the more I listen, the more I like. I love academia. I love rigorous academic research. Problem is, in many academic circles it's just this shitstorm of liberal hippie political correctness. And a Marxist circle jerks. Social justice warriors with a victim mentality. Peterson keeps the academic rigor and nixes the politically correct dogshit. And if you don't like it you can F off to your safe space. For a number of years before he got popular I heavily researched the correlates and predictors of success and came to the same conclusion he did, so I could individually work on those traits. Intelligence, contentiousness, industriousness, social networking, ACT. So when I'm watching his videos and he literally lists every one of those things, I'm impressed. Anyway, I think he's got a lot to say and can really teach people to be successful. Anyway, any fans? JP is pretty polarizing, but yeah, I like JP. I read his book earlier this year and thought that it was pretty good. There was a chapter on parenting that I truly enjoyed. I wouldn't say I am a fanboy. There are things we don't see eye to eye on. Regardless though, I love that in a culture that is so overly offended he isn't backing down, or smoothing the edges of his thoughts. I don't like when he specifically words things or takes a stance that only has as a goal to rub the SJWs the wrong way. But most of the time he is saying what he believes and what he thinks will actually make our culture better. All I know is that my mum tried for 18 years and couldn't get me to clean my room. Jordan Peterson did it in one YouTube video. Also read the Bible lol edit, since no one will get that joke. You've been beaten to the punch. I'm sure you'll enjoy reading that thread though. Checking it out now. If the mods want to merge the threads, that's fine, or we can see if this conversation goes anywhere. Total opposite. He's a really smart academic who tells it like it is. Most academics, while brilliant in some regards, have his hippie, liberal Marxist safe space bullshit. Basically this, there are some jokes about Peterson being a father figure. I mean, my mum tried to get me to clean my room for 18 plus years and I never did. It took Peterson to convince me. Not sure if you're still active on the forum, but this is the book that convinced me to stop lying, almost completely, even little white ones. Even did I gain a few pounds, Sam Harris's essay on lying. Ah, how I love the Ignore member feature on this board. His classroom lectures are the best out of all his stuff. Some actionable advice. If you're afraid to get started. If you're a chronic procrastinator. If you have an addiction. I understand. His anecdotes are amazing, and it's so nice of him to give us an insight into the psyche of humanity's greatest thinker. Really allows us to understand what drives him and makes him tick. My favorite book is his magnum opus, Maps of Meaning. In fact, I jotted down my favorite passage on a really big napkin and keep it in my back pocket at all times, ready to be read whenever I feel the craves for some JBP. He also has the entire Maps of Meaning course uploaded to YouTube, complete with all the lectures, exercises, etc. I even think the full courseware is up on his site. Does he have a map there that is more like my map, where if you think and work hard, you will do well? The world will help you because it loves you, and the omnipotent God won't come and kill your family and make you suffer for eternity. I am honestly thinking that a guy with his mind should be able to realize that not all live in the same doom and gloom universe that he lives in. If all his stories are tragedies, then I should start avoiding that guy. Actually, I am hoping someone else will tell me if he has a map for me, or all his maps are just various degrees of sadness, because I do not want to read or watch any more of his stuff to confirm what I am suspecting about him already. I'm surprised Jordan Peterson has not been assassinated. He talks about things you're not supposed to discuss. Like what? This is the United States of America. First Amendment free speech. One critique I have of JP is his habit of redefining words. For example, on YouTube there's a 2-hour argument with Sam Harris about the proper definition of truth. Most people would assume the definition that which is consistent with physical reality, but JP uses something closer to the way one should act morally. There's other examples too, especially with regards to religion. I think trying to force others to conform to your own custom definitions is a form of intellectually bullying, even if your own definitions are better. Words are defined based on how people actually use them, not how they should be used. He's redefined truth. He's redefined God. He questions what you mean by Jesus. And that is because Jordan Peterson promotes epistemological relativism, a postmodern school of thought that argues truth is relative, and disguises it as some strange sort of evolutionary pragmatism. And on the Sam Harris podcast, he's said, this could be all fine and dandy. He's not the only one to speak of these Darwinian ideas. But it's dishonest and deceptive of him to act as if he's on a crusade against postmodernism, and yet promote one of its most characterizing ideas, relativism. But then, to Jordan Peterson, truth is what makes you come out on the other side as a winner. Read that again. Would you trust the intellectual integrity of a man with that opinion? In before JBP fanboys rushing in to say what he really means is that I like Jordan Peterson. I like DJ DeMarco. I like Lou Rockwell. I like Murray Rothbard. I like Ron Paul. I like Ben Shapiro. I like Ezra T. Benson. Those are a few influencers that I've read about and have respect for their perspectives.